with Jokerthefool. This is our 13th episode, and today we'll be discussing why you should raise your own kids and how, even without Dianne Feinstein, the corporate gerontocracy lives on. And to get right into that word I just said, gerontocracy, basically rule by the older class, by the people who are the elderly, much more so than the average adult population, and that described Feinstein, who was 90, I believe, was in the Senate for 30 years, and that's very typical for a lot of these people operating at the highest level of the federal government, either very old, and have been in the government in some way or another for a very long time. You see, Biden had a long career in the Senate. He was vice president for 8 years, and you've got, the Mitch McConnells of the world. You got Mitch McConnell, you've got Chuck Schumer, you've got Nancy Pelosi. They're all over 70. They have this long history of being in the government, using it to enrich their net worth, because we've got this very toxic corporatist system where the corporations and the government work in tandem, and that's by lobbying these politicians, and they are able to enrich their net worth to a point where they just use that money and that influence that they've built to stay in their positions of power, or move around in that you move from the House to the Senate to the cabinet to the presidency, or whatever it is. You're operating in the federal government for a good 30-40 years, and you're doing that by just taking the checks from the people who can give them to you, and by parroting whatever the people who are powerful enough to manipulate things want you to do. And you've also got the stuff like gerrymandering, where you're drawing out districts in a specific way where you're going to get these votes, and you got the two-party system that feeds into that, and it really operates as a uniparty. But basically getting into it. But to explain this is that this system is very long and well established, and in order to abolish it, you're really going to have to ask people who have no power to let power go, right? They've got the will and the wit, or the wherewithal to gain power, but they don't have the power to let power go. So to think that any of these politicians are going to vote for something like term limits is absolutely ridiculous. So we need to come to the fundamental understanding that this system is no good and needs to go, right? But the people who need to understand that are the ones who are benefiting from it the most. So it's a very hard hill to get over. But that's what you need to realize, is that Dianne Feinstein is just one part of the problem, and it is a system that wants to stay in place because the people who need to realize that it dismantle are the ones who benefit from it the most. You're not going to ask people in the ivory tower aren't even inclined to go down a level lower, much less tear down the whole thing. So it's a very hard hump to get over, like I said, and that's why Dianne Feinstein isn't someone who we need to say like, oh, it's good that she died, this is a good thing where like it's going to make the country better. No, it's just, someone else is going to get into that seat, and they're going to enrich themselves. So whoever Newsom appoints, I imagine, is going to run. They're probably going to win, and they're going to be the incumbent. And like I said, they're going to probably have a career where they're using donor and CPAC money and special interest money and the influence you get from being an incumbent from the legacy media to propel themselves into being a career politician. And that cycle is just going to keep going unless we break the wheel. Little Game of Thrones reference there. But the first topic I discussed, why you should raise your own kids, is what we're going to move on to next. And I did see this story. I'll have the link below in the podcast description. YouTube and Rumble and Odyssey as well should have it as well, so you can check it out with me. Is that this happened in the Bay Area? A Bay Area daycare is that you had an employee who was sentenced for 25 years for let's just say doing unkind things. We'll use SA for 4 to 6 year olds, and filming it, distributing it on messaging platforms like Kik. And apparently this person is transgender, in the sense that female to male, getting on testosterone, and that was part of the reason that was blamed for it. Now I've done a lot of research into the whole phenomenon of transgenderism. I'm writing a book about it, and in doing that, I've read a lot about people who undergo that medical transition, female to male, and they get on testosterone. And one of the things they do mention is that they do have a lot more sexual desire that they're dealing with, and a lot of it isn't, the most kind things you're fantasizing about. It doesn't help if you're watching pornography and you're watching all this degenerate, messed up stuff, and you're dealing with these mind-altering chemicals that you're injecting into your body that are exogenous, and they're giving you amplified sexual desire. And now is that to say that the reason why this person did what they did to children was solely because of that? I would not say so. I'd say these are underlying issues, and that when you get on something like testosterone and you're amplifying it, you're one of the androgenizing effects, is that you're going to have an increased libido typically, and that just compounds into, if you had underlying desires to be a sex criminal, then you're going to be more likely to engage in those sorts of things. And it doesn't help if you are, and this person was for sure consuming pornography, and that doesn't help you have any healthy sexual boundaries. And unfortunately, when you have no sexual boundaries, you're going to become completely depraved and do stuff like this, which is why we really need to, one, have a culture where people act morally, and two, have a culture where people take responsibility for raising their own children. Because you look at daycares full of pedophiles, look at public schools full of pedophiles, and that's just going to be the norm as more and more people are busy and they tune out, and they hand these kids over to these big institutions that don't really have any interest in background checking reliably, because it's expensive, and you might background check the wrong person out of a job, and then you've got all these DEI lawsuits and all these sorts of things that you're going to be dealing with. That is not something the big people in charge want to deal with, because they're it doesn't affect them. They've got the money to weather these sorts of things. So I know I don't have kids, so this isn't coming a lot for me. But if you are one of the people who does listen to this podcast, who does have kids, and you're in a position to be able to raise them more, even if you've got them in daycare 5 days a week and can do 4, that's a good improvement in my mind. So you just want to be as active in your family's life as possible, and that goes, even if you don't have kids, like I don't, but I try to be involved with my family, the people who are the most important to me, and your kids should be the most important people to you if you decide to have them and you want to have them. So the most active you can be in their lives is the best thing you can do, and they're going to be happier and healthier. I know, homeschooling is demonized, but homeschoolers do well if you're a good parent and you can do it, and you can get your kids out of the public school or even to like a better private school, and like I said, be active in their lives and put them on the right path. They're going to be a lot better than a lot of kids that go to public schools, because the public school system is absolutely awful in America, at least. And I am talking this from an American-centric point of view. And as the West degrades the public school, every institution, including the public school system, is going to just get worse and worse. So that's just something you would like. I would like more people to avoid that, and especially with stuff like the COVID pandemic, right, where all the public schools were shut down and completely destroyed a lot of kids' lives. It was because they moved everything online. The schools weren't equipped to retain these students to help set them on the right path, not in the way that a loving family would be, and it's because they're not that, and they're trying to be a replacement for that, and it does not end up working at all. If you look at the mental health statistics for teenagers when they go back to school, you look at all of the criminals who are unfortunately teaching them what they do to children is very consistently a problem. Now, is it the most widespread thing in the world? No, but it's something you need to be aware of. And then, of course, you've got what other kids do to your kids, with the bullying and the stuff with social media and all these sorts of things. And, a lot of this stuff can be sexual in nature, where these kids are forming relationships. And like I've talked about with pornography, there really aren't any sexual boundaries in this society anymore, far less so than there used to be. And it causes, these, pictures of these kids getting uploaded online by other kids, and they get bullied over it, and it creates all these issues that wouldn't exist if the child had a more active family life, as in if they were homeschooled, if they were in a better environment, the parents were more active instead of having to work 2 jobs, to make rent and to afford food. That's the situation that we're in. There's a lot less economic stability, so there's going to be a lot less familial stability, and that means the average situation for the average child is just going to get worse and worse. And as you've got this crumbling infrastructure for childcare in the public schools, you're going to notice more stuff like this. Not necessarily that like every teacher coming out is going to be a pedophile. It's just that the average kid is going to be worse and worse off mentally, physically, and financially in the future. So that's my little rant for today. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. This is the 13th episode, and we are going to go to the intro. Thank you for being in the Velvet Room with Jokerthefool. Be sure to follow my Substack, velvetroompublishing.substack.com, to read Machine to Man and all my other projects.